Hi everyone, welcome to this lab series on user ID. So continuing to our previous video where we understood what exactly is user ID concept in Palo Alto and why do we use it. Now in this particular module, we are going to go ahead and do the configuration step of how to do configuration of user ID when we are doing agentless configuration. Okay, so this time we are going to use agentless, and in the next video we are going to see with the help of agent. So currently the setup we are going to use throughout this particular lab series is this, that we have a particular Palo Alto appliance sitting over here. Now this Palo Alto appliance is connected to our three zones: inside zone, DMZ zone, and internet zone. Okay, so this is how the configuration is done on the Palo Alto, that we have our inside zone, which is connected to an IP address of 192.168.10.0/24. Our DMZ zone, which is connected to an IP address of 192.168.20.0/24. And the internet is connected currently to our internet gateway, which is IP address is 172.16.1.0/24, in which currently the outside interface of Palo Alto has got the IP address of 172.16.1.1. Okay, so this is how the physical connection is set up. On the Palo Alto, we have already created the IP address and zones, and we have created our first policy, which is allowing a traffic from our internal subnet, where the PC which is connected is .2, which is 192.168.10.2, who is getting access to a particular server on the internet. And we have created a dummy server, so it is not actually connecting to internet, but it is connecting to a dummy server which has got an IP address of 172.16.3.2. Okay, so this is our dummy server which is connected on the internet, and we are going to go ahead and connect to this dummy server throughout this lab. All right, and we are currently not doing any deep packet inspection or the security profile configuration on Palo Alto. So we are simply matching the packet on layer 7 information, which is using just an app ID. And we have set up 3 application signatures. One is web browsing, one is DNS, and one is SSL. Okay, so these are the 3 common ones which you will be using for passing the traffic to the internet in your environment. So same 3 policy we have gone ahead, same 3 application we have gone ahead and set up in our policy, which is called as into internet. Okay, we'll see soon in our verification. So what we want to do is currently to allow only the specific user who are part of a group. So we have gone ahead and created 2 groups in our Active Directory. So we want to only allow users from the group which is allow internet to have access to internet. Okay, which is to our dummy server 172.16.3.2. User 1 is already belonging in the group allow internet. User 2 is currently part of the group called as no internet. Okay, and all the users and groups are connected to the domain called as security.lab. So that is what we are going to do, is we are going to integrate our Palo Alto to this domain. So currently our domain controller resides on our inside network, who has got an IP address of 192.168.10.3, which is over here, DC. And all our user 1 and user 2 and the groups are part of this particular domain called as security.lab. All right. So what we're going to do is we are going to integrate our Palo Alto to query to this domain controller. So as we said in the first video, the context of what is exactly is passive authentication with agentless is nothing but where we are doing a query, a polling to our domain controller to find out the user to IP mapping. So when the packet comes in, if I want to know that this particular user belongs in which group, I have already gone ahead and retrieved the group information from the domain controller. But if I want to verify that this particular IP currently who is logged in, to query to that domain controller, I need to go ahead and integrate my Palo Alto to do it. Okay, and that is what we are going to do it with the help of a service which is running in Windows called as WMI, which is nothing but Windows Management Instrumentation. This is the service which is going to be used with Agentless. Since we don't have any agent installed on the domain controller or any of the member PC, Palo Alto has to query to this service called as WMI. Okay, so let's go ahead and set up our Agentless. Before we go ahead and set up, you need to make sure that there are certain prerequisites which you have successfully configured on your Palo Alto. The most and important prerequisite is make sure that your DNS is configured correctly. By default on the Palo Alto appliance is configured with the domain name system to be of Palo Alto to resolve all the queries of Palo Alto's DNS server. So you need to change that so that when you're trying to integrate your Palo Alto with the AD, it needs to resolve that domain name. And it could be that in a normal enterprise, your internal domain name is not the same name as what you host services on the internet. So make sure that the DNS is successfully able to be resolved by your Palo Alto. Second, and this is an optional thing, but most of the enterprise would be doing it, that you would be creating a service account on your Active Directory, which is specifically going to do the querying of the groups. Okay, so the groups which are created or the users which are created on the domain controller needs to be retrieved by the Palo Alto. And to retrieve that, he needs to have a service account. He needs to have the information of that directory database. And to do that, we need to go ahead and create a service account, or you can use the default administrator account which comes in when you deploy your Active Directory. But in most of the enterprise, you would be creating a service account. So when you create a service account, at that time, the service account should be member of these three groups. Okay, so it's mandatory that for Palo Alto to retrieve the groups or to resolve to the WMI service, it needs to go ahead and be part of these three groups. In case if you're using Windows 2003 server, then definitely you will not be able to see this group because this group was introduced in 2008. So in that case, you need to make sure that only the service account is part of these two groups. Okay, but if you're using Windows 2008 and above, then you need to make sure that your service account is part of these three groups. Okay, and the third prerequisite requirement is to make sure that your WF service account, whatever service account you have created, it is allowed in the WMI service. Okay, so these are the two permissions which needs to be enabled, and I will walk you through all the prerequisite of where to exactly configure. So don't worry about it. You will see exactly where the three prerequisite which are required for doing the configuration of Agentless, where exactly we go ahead and make those changes in Palo Alto, okay, and in Active Directory, in case if you want to see it. Okay, so now let's go to our lab server. So this is the dashboard. This is the Palo Alto which we are accessing currently. So the first, where exactly I make the change for my DNS. So I go into my devices, and under devices, we need to go into setup, and under setup, we need to go into services. And this is the place where you will go ahead and put your information about your DNS server. Okay, so currently the DNS server is my AD server. So I am using my internal integrated DNS on the AD. So I'm using this IP address over here. Okay, so that is the same IP address of my Active Directory. And once you have integrated it, you can do a check by doing a simple ping to your domain name. So in our case, the domain name is security.lab. So we can do a simple ping to see if we are able to successfully able to resolve the hostname. Okay, the ping might not work, that's okay, but at least you know that it is able to resolve the hostname. Okay, now the second prerequisite is at the AD level. So if you go to your AD, inside your AD, you need to make sure that in case if you're creating a service account, then your service account should be part of the. I'm not creating a service account. I'm using the built-in administrator account, but you need to make sure that whichever account you are using, it should be part of those three groups which we discussed earlier, which is distributive comp user group, and event log reader group, and service operator group. Sorry, server operator group. So he should be part of these three groups: domain comp group and server operator group. I'm using Windows 2003, so I will not be able to see the event uh, log reader group. The third prerequisite, which is enabling that specific service account in the WMI service. So to access WMI, you need to go ahead and use the run snippet of Windows and type in WMI wmimgmt.msc and click on OK, and it will open up the Windows management instrumentation. In that, you go ahead and click on your actions, properties, and in that security tab, and inside security tab, you need to go ahead and click on your root, CIM version 2, application, I'm so sorry, CIM version 2, security. So select CIM version 2. So security, root, expand the root, CIM version 2, security. And then over here, you need to add your service account. So currently I have administrator, which is already added, and we need to enable account permission and remote enable. Both these should be allowed. Okay, so this is a prerequisite which needs to be set up before you begin your agentless deployment of user ID. Once you have met all your prerequisite correctly, then you need the configuration step is pretty much simple. It's a 4-step process in which the first thing you will do is create a LDAP server profile. Then you go ahead and create an authentication profile, and then you create your user ID configuration for doing the server monitoring and group mapping, and going ahead and enabling the policy for doing the user ID and enabling it at the zone level. So let's walk the first step of integrating an LDAP server profile. Okay. The other thing before I move from this Active Directory server is that I have these users, and user 1 and user 2. And user 1 is currently part of that group which I said, which is allow internet. And user 2 is going to be part of the group which is no internet. Okay, no internet. So now let's go ahead and look at our configuration for agentless user ID. So the first thing is we go into our Palo Alto device, and then from there we click on LDAP, So under server profiles, we are using LDAP. We click on add and we give a name. So we are going to say internal AD server. Over here, we are going to add our server, LDAP server. You can have multiple uh, domain controllers in your environment. So you need to list all the domain controllers. It completely depends on your network, how vast is your Active Directory network. So in that case, if you have multiple domain controllers, you need to make sure you enter all the domain controllers over here. So I'm going to say DC1 because I only have one domain controller, and the IP address of that domain controller is 192.168.10.3. Okay, so this is again your LDAP configuration. The next thing is the port number. So this is going to be 389, which is your LDAP port number. The port number is a non-SSL. So in case if you are using SSL, then it would be 636. But since we are not going to use SSL, we are going to use 389. Okay. The next thing is domain. This is my domain name is security.lab. Okay. So you need to understand what exactly goes inside the domain. So my domain name is security.lab, right? But I'm going to enter in the domain the net BIOS name, not my domain name. So inside the domain field, you do not enter the domain name, but you enter the net BIOS name. So if I go to my domain controller, in case if you don't know what is the net BIOS name of your domain, you can go into your domain controller on the left hand side where you see your Active Directory domain name. Click on right click and click on properties, and you will see the pre-Windows 2000, which is nothing but the net BIOS name, so which is security. So you need to make sure that under the domain you don't put security.lab, which is in my case the domain name. You put the net BIOS name. It is very much important, or else it will fail for resolving or getting the user to user to IP mappings. Okay. The type is directory server, e-director of novel or Sun directors, a Sun directory service of Sun Microsystem, or other would be something like in case if you are using your directory service on some Linux based LDAP, then you would be using others. But currently we are using Active Directory, so we'll select Active Directory. If you click on drop down, it will automatically try to retrieve the uh, base name. So this is how the base name is going to be populated for me. The base name is DC is equal to security, comma DC is equal to lab. Okay, so this is the base name. The bind DN name is the service account which you have entered. So in my case, the service account is administrator at security.lab. Okay, so you need to make sure that you enter the service account in this format, which is username at security.lab, which is the domain name. Okay, then the password would be the password for that service account, whatever it is, right? And then you don't have to make any changes to these timers. In case you want to tweak it, you can do it. We are not going to do it. We simply say okay, and then the first step of introducing your LDAP server, your domain controller to Palo Alto is done. The second step is creating an authentication profile. So authentication profile is nothing but like this, and you can see it currently. I have an authentication profile for remote access VPN, SSL, Global Protect VPN. So authentication profile basically controls what type of authentication for different services Palo Alto is going to use. Okay, and who should he query, which server account he should query or directory account he should query for that particular user. So currently I'm going to create a new one for my agentless configuration. So agentless server, agentless AD server, I would say. So the service is agentless. Again, name can be anything. And the authentication server he is going to reach is LDAP. And the server profile is that LDAP profile which we created, which is internal AD server. And over here, the login attribute is going to be SAM account name. Again, it has to be exactly same way, SAM account name, because this is the attribute. Attribute is nothing but how the format of your username would be presented to Active Directory. Okay, so this is how Windows would accept the username for authentication, which is in a format called as SAM account name. S is small, AM is capital. Again, for the account, A is capital, then rest everything is small, and the name is N capital. Okay, so it has to be exactly like that. And again, in case of the password expires, then before 7 days it would show the warning. Okay, by default. In case if you want, you can tweak it, change it as per your requirement. Now the third step is, after doing a LDAP profile, introducing the LDAP profile, creating an authentication profile which is going to be used by my service of user ID, then the next step is the actual user ID configuration. So the user ID configuration is done under user ID option on the left hand side. You click on it, it gives you this page. The first thing you're going to do is server monitoring. Because we are using agentless, you need to enable server monitoring. So I'm going to say monitor this server. So this is going to be my agentless server. Okay, and the IP address of that particular server is 192.168.10.3, my AD. Again, if you have multiple servers, you need to make sure that you put all the servers, all the domain controllers which you want him to monitor. Currently, the status is not showing anything because we have not committed the configuration, which we will do in a minute. Then after that, the next step is to enable the user ID agents. So you click on the edit option. You put the username, the service account, which is going to be used for querying to the domain controller. So the user account is, again, it has to be in the format security /administrator and the password of the service account. Okay, so security / and the password. Server monitor is already enabled for logging the Windows, querying to the Windows server and retrieving the user to IP mapping by verifying the security log. So you have by default it is enabled. The thing which is not enabled is probing. So you need to enable probing so that you can probe and send the query to the domain controller. You click on OK. After that, the next step is group mapping, which means that this configuration controls which groups he should actually use for user ID. Because it could be that in your directory server, your Active Directory, you might have multiple groups, but you don't want to use all the groups, right? In Palo Alto for user ID. Like in our case, we don't want to use the group called as no internet. We want to only use the group which is allow internet. So in that case, I would only be using one group or retrieving one group from my domain controller. So if I click over here, I would say name is internal AD group. Server profile is the LDAP profile. You don't have to make any change. You can see the username would be in the same format what we type, SAM account name, group include. And this is the directory structure of my AD. automatically it will, if you have resolved your DNS correct, you have a configured prerequisite correctly, all those 3 prerequisites, you would be able to see your domain directory correctly. Okay, over here you will go into the users where you have the groups. In my case, the groups are in the users, and I'm going to say allow internet. So only allow internet group will be used for checking if the user belongs in this group or not, because that is the only group which is going to have access to internet. Then once this is done, I would click on commit, click OK, and then let's wait for some time to check if he is able to go ahead and connect to the Active Directory, and in our server monitoring if it is showing connected or not. So we'll go into our user mapping, and under the server monitoring, this should show connected. Connected means that I am successfully able to reach to the Active Directory server. And if I go right now to my CLI, and if I run the command show user IDs, I should see that for that group which we have selected under group mapping server, which is allowing one group, which is allow internet, you can see that currently the user belonging in this group is user1. Okay, if new users are added to this group, then it will automatically show the new usernames. Okay, so this shows us that we are able to retrieve the group information from the AD server. The next step after this would be to go ahead and create the policy and enable user ID in the zone level. So we'll go into policy. We already have our policy which is allowing into internet access for our LAN user group, LAN subnet. I'm going to edit this specific policy, and I'm saying that if the source is coming from inside, going to the destination outside any destination which is on the internet, and it belongs to this specific address which is my LAN users, which is nothing but subnet of 192.168.10.0/24, then I want you to do user authentication, and the user should be part of that allow internet group, okay, to have access to internet. I would say okay. I would go into my network and I would enable user ID at the zone level. So I'll go into zones. I would go into my inside zone and I would enable user ID. Okay. So these 4 steps would be required to configure your agentless configuration. Agentless user ID configuration. So now let's go ahead and verify if we are able to go ahead and authenticate our user or not. Okay. So currently, if I go to my CLI, this is one command to verify which users are belonging to that group which we have mapped, and the next command is show user IP user mapping, IP user mapping all. You can see that currently user 1 is logged in, so he has probed to the domain controller and retrieved from the security event log the user who has logged in on the IP address 192.168.10.2 is user 1. So if I go to my PC, which is, you can see over here, this particular PC has an IP address of 192.168.10.2, which is what we are seeing over here, 192.168.10.2, and the user who has logged in is security /user1. The other thing which is important is you can see over here the security is the domain. So it is using the NetBIOS because we had put NetBIOS in our LDAP profile. If you see something different, it will not work. If both these domains should match for user ID authentication to work successfully. Okay. Now let's verify it. So we'll go to our PC, which is my Windows PC. I'll access the server, which is 172.16.3.1, which is nothing but the public server. You can see user one, who is part of the Allow Internet group, has the access to the internet. So if I go back, I look at monitor, I should see now that all my logs, user one, should come up. Right? So you can see that user one is accessing from inside to outside. He destination 172.16.3.1, and it was a web browsing port 80 connection. So user one, this gives us the first benefit, which is visibility, right? So now we have some visibility that who is connected to which IP address. If I go to that particular PC and I log out, so it's not only the allow list, but for the block traffic also, I would be able to see the username. So let me log out and let's log in as user 2. Okay, wrong server. It is 2. Yep, user 1, now user 2, and password. Let's enter. Let's log into the server, and we will go ahead and open internet. So first, let's verify if we can see the new user mapping. You can see now user 2 is logged in, right? And I'm querying from AD. So this is not coming from a UIA, which is a user ID agent. It's coming from AD. So I'm using Agentless. Now if I try to access that same 172.16.3.1, you can see that it is not giving him access. If we go to our logs and we clear the filter and we do all, you can see this one, this policy, it's hitting on in to out drop rule. Again, matching on the default policy deny, and it's denying the action. So this way we have visibility of not only for the allow rules, but for block rules. We can also will be able to see the identity in our user filter. So in case if you are doing URL filtering, you can see that in URL filtering under threats. So in all kind of reporting and logging, you would be able to see user. You can also go ahead and get user activity reports. So you can go ahead and create a user activity saying that for my this report is user 1 report. I can say that, okay, for last 15 minutes or last 1 hour or last 7 days, however, give me the report for user 1. So you can see that it shows me user 1. If I want user 2, it will show me user 2 also, right? So it gives us report for different users based on the policies and what type of access he had. All those information would be available. So we can check download user. So right now it has been downloaded. If we open it, it opens up in the PDF, and we can see that user 1 tried to access specific. So again, application visibility and all, it's not showing, but it will show up the user over here. It could be because I have selected last 15 minutes, that's why, and we just connected it right now due to that reason. So if we wait for 15 minutes, it should show us the complete detail. Okay, so this is how you configure your agentless user ID. So thank you for watching, and please watch the next video, which is on agent-based authentication with passive.